So, at the conclusion of US Open 2021, we stand here with a new Grand Slam champion. At long last, the next generation has captured their maiden Grand Slam title, and it comes in the form of Daniil Medvedev capturing the US Open only 2 years after this tournament really put him on the map and cemented him in the upper echelon of the game. It took a while, but it became very apparent early on this year that this could be the season in which these younger guys finally break through at the majors. The cracks in at least Federer and Nadal's armor started to show in a big way this year, but there was just that one problem in that Novak Djokovic was just not letting go. He said it at the beginning of this year that the young guys are coming. At some point they will replace us, but myself, I am going to make them work their asses off to do so, and boy did he ever throughout the duration of this year. It was because of this that a lot of people, myself included, thought that he was about to complete history that was unprecedented for anyone not named Rod Laver and complete the calendar Grand Slam here at the US Open. He was my pre-tournament pick, and even though I did not end up making a finals preview, my mind hadn't changed. If you've watched any of my videos all year, I have maintained that until one of these younger guys actually gets over the hump, I'm not going to pick it. That being said, before this tournament, I did say that I had the most faith in Medvedev being able to do so, and with all the factors of him having a drastically easier draw than Novak Djokovic primarily, there were a lot of things that almost had me on the verge of going against that rule. It was almost a case of head says Medvedev before the tournament. But that being said, after the dud that I thought he threw in the Aussie Open final earlier this year, even with him, I wasn't about to go against my better judgment, especially when throughout the year, no matter what, whether it was injury in Australia, whether it was wear and tear with a lot of time spent on court in Roland Garros, I still thought, even after Djokovic went 5 sets against Zverev on Friday night before the final, I was still of the belief that some way, somehow, he was going to get this done in 5, just like I predicted before the tournament, just as he has done all season long. Now that being said, when Novak went down early in this match, it did feel different. He had dropped, 6 sets coming into the final, as well as 5 first sets. But yeah, this time it felt different. The fashion in which Medvedev emphatically finished that first set, got the break in the opening game of the match, and it really wasn't as close as the single break indicated. It very easily could have been a 6-2 set, and throughout, Medvedev just totally unbothered on serve. It was his sharpest set of the whole match. He did not put a single foot wrong, and in contrast to the Zverev match 2 days earlier, where you could tell Novak was here for the taking in that match as well, rather than easing back and becoming more passive like Zverev did when he really should have put his foot on the gas, Medvedev did exactly that after the first set. Yes, there were chances for Novak to get back in early in the second set, and who knows how the match would have flipped had he taken those chances. In all likelihood, he takes that second set. If he takes any of those 5 breakpoint chances he had across the first, or at least the second and third Medvedev serve games of that set, didn't take them, mostly on account of some brilliant Medvedev serving, which was really the standout part of Medvedev's game throughout this match. Honestly, if you ask me, I think, serving aside, I would say he played better in the 2019 final, but the serve was just such a big eraser. It never really let Djokovic into this match. The guy was having some Federer-esque, sub 1 minute service games, multiple of them, I'm pretty sure, throughout this match. And even
when he could have gotten tight late in this match with the crowd just trying to get in his head at the end, as well as Novak kind of putting in one last push in those last 3 games, Daniil never flinched, and that's why really it felt different this time. I mean, yes, Djokovic was jaded in this final, as well as a multitude of other things I'll go into later, but it felt different this time, and that's because Daniil Medvedev, unlike the other top guys of his crop of players that are in that, 23, 25-ish age range, so that would be Tsitsipas and Zverev, basically, but unlike those guys, he really has the intangibles down packed. The X factor is there with Medvedev. It's a lot easier to trust him mentally, especially when it comes to closing time, as a lot of other people have made note of. He is pretty much ice, and I have held this opinion ever since that 2019 final. I mean, that match on its own is a microcosm of all that there is to admire about Daniil Medvedev mentally. If something's not working for him, he's not afraid to go out of his comfort zone. That match, you saw him come into net a lot more and really volley like you never thought he could in that match. Other matches, you see him just blasting the second serve. Mainly what comes to mind is Cincy 2019 against Djokovic, as well as in this final. The gears are always turning for Medvedev, even in those pressure situations, and it's a lot of stuff that he does that those guys don't, which separates them when it comes to crunch time. He is just miles beyond what those two guys are. And when you add that on to a guy who is seemingly built to win on these courts, he loves playing on North American soil, it's proved to be his most winning time of year. You really knew it was only a matter of time before Daniil Medvedev would hoist this trophy. And as he stands now, he has come full circle from that 2019 final and captured his first major title at that very venue, breaking through the Big Three barrier and being the first of his generation to clinch a major title. And now onto the Djokovic side of things. First of all, you have to say it marks the conclusion of an unbelievable and spectacular 2021 Grand Slam season for Djokovic. It's probably going to yield him his 7th record-breaking year-end #1 finish, and I'm basically stating the obvious and saying there's really nothing to mope over considering what he did this year, considering he's already done 4 in a row. I know it's not the calendar slam, but again, as I've said earlier, I don't hold the calendar slam in that much higher regard as I do the non-calendar slam. Your guy already did it in 2015, 2016, and at the end of the day, this tournament isn't what's going to mark his 2021 season. People aren't going to remember it on this match. Again, stating the obvious, but I do feel that a lot of what Djokovic brought to the table in this final was what had to do with it being relatively lopsided, with it being in straight sets. Obviously, he was jaded. All of us could see that. The fuel tank was running on empty from even as early as the first game of the match. And I do think very early on, Daniil saw that on the other side of the net, and he did a great job of really not pressing at all, just making Novak hit through him, and without his legs, and Medvedev really making it a point to target the Djokovic backhand and give him as few forehands as possible, really. It became increasingly hard for Novak to break points open. You know, he does have his world-class backhand, but for one, old Djokovic's backhand isn't as dynamic a weapon as it once was. And even him, he's not one of those rare players like Benoit Paire or even Zverev, who's going to look to their backhand to really inject pace into a rally and break points open. That's his forehand, even for how great his backhand is. And Medvedev did a great job of making it a point to ensure that Novak was hitting as few neutral ball forehands as possible. Forehand to forehand, Djokovic obviously has a massive edge in that department, one that he utilized very well in the Aussie Open final earlier this year. And when you put that on top of his legs being drained, he really started pressing late in this match. You saw him come to net almost 50 times in 3 sets. And a lot of people that have watched Djokovic for a long time, you know, it's not really a good thing when he's just going to the serve and volley with so much frequency, going to the net with that much frequency. A lot of the times it's because he's pressing. In this case, it was a combination of that and him just not having it in him physically to go the long haul with Medvedev. He was really trying to finish points as quickly as possible. And then lastly, on top of that, the pressure. As far as the amount of pressure placed on a tennis player's shoulders, the only thing comparable probably was Serena in the US Open in 2015 when she was also going for the calendar year slam. Perhaps the only thing comparable I've seen in the men's game was maybe Roger Federer in 2009 at Roland Garros once Nadal went out. But regardless, I mean, this was a step up from that, and it really showed because I've never seen Novak Djokovic look that tense. I've never seen him look that flustered. It was very visible, and it was only amplified by the fact that he was gassed. But you just saw so many strange misses from him in this matches, in particular on drop shots. He's usually the best as far as drop shot retrieval. He always finds success with that short angle off drop shots. But multiple times in this one, at crucial times also, he just shoveled these drop shots that weren't very good for the most part from Medvedev. Of course, the most notable being that second set point where Medvedev hit again a very poor drop shot, and this is a ball that Djokovic puts away 99 times out of 100. I guess this was that one time, but he shoveled it wide. You can say that maybe that was a product of Medvedev's speed forcing him to overplay, but I certainly feel that that aspect had a part to play as far as nerves for Djokovic. Countless times he's found a way to really manage his fatigue even in situations like this, but he just never got it going. And once he did get some momentum going, it was too little too late, down 2-5. And that's all she wrote. Medvedev just too tough, and rightfully became this year's US Open champion. I'm sure he's going to rack up a couple more of these hardcourt majors. He's in the midst of his prime right now, so you do expect a couple more to come up in the next couple years. He does have the tools to translate more effectively than he is right now, certainly on the other two surfaces of clay and grass. But on the hard courts, and in particular the North American hard courts, you could make a very compelling case over the last 3 years since 2019 that he is right up there, up top, as far as the best hard court players in the game. As for Novak Djokovic, as much as I admittedly did feel this was one of those slap-in-the-face matches as I was watching it, where you see one of these legends like Nadal at Roland Garros 2015 or Federer this year at Wimbledon against Hurkacz. It was one of those matches where it was kind of a slap in the face, where you see one of these legends just being made to look very old, and that is a little bit how I felt with Djokovic, just because Medvedev is kind of style adjacent to Novak, not totally. But in this match, you did see the younger, slightly style-adjacent counterpart really taking the older guy to task, pretty much outplaying him, pretty much beating him at his own game. And a lot of times where Medvedev has beaten Djokovic and found success against him ever since 2019, you have seen that, where he is one of the few guys, maybe the only guy right now, who
is actually capable of beating Novak at his own game, and that entails when it comes to crunch time, just staying solid. And he's probably the only guy right now who actually can force Novak to be the aggressor and can keep going toe-to-toe as long as it takes. And a lot of the times you've seen matches like this, like the ATP Finals last year, that matchup, as well as the tail end of their Cincinnati 2019 match, where Djokovic does kind of run out of gas in those long exchanges with this one guy. Now, that being said, their 2 Grand Slam finals in 2021 in Australia and New York aren't totally representative of them playing at their best simultaneously. It rarely happened in both matches, honestly. Both for different reasons. I mean, Medvedev in Australia, I do think, kind of put in a dud. He buckled under the relentless Djokovic pressure, who, unlike in this final in New York, back then in Australia, had more of a full fuel tank, was willing to suffer, was willing to go to war if that was what was needed. And on the other side of the net, just inexplicably, Medvedev didn't have it that day. Here, of course, a little bit of the opposite. Medvedev willing to suffer, willing to stay out there as long as it took. Of course, much fresher for the final than his opponent, a factor that has been a bit underrated in hindsight as far as previews for this US Open, because a lot of the winners in the last couple of years have benefited from having drastically easier runs and an easier time in the lead up to the final than the finalists. Obviously, we know US Open last major of the year, players are beat up, players aren't 100%. That is, of course, so important, and it has been important, particularly in the last couple of years as the big 3 age into their mid to late 30s. It's just been amplified that much more. Obviously, it played its part here. Djokovic running on fumes from a very long season and a very grueling US Open run, but honestly, I think it was more than just a physical loss. I will say, at least a little bit, I do think the moment got to him. Understandably so, given what was on the line for him, but he'll be back. I mean, this isn't a loss that should sting and linger with him, especially given how routine it was. And more than anything, I do believe him when he says that the biggest takeaway he'll have from this US Open is how special the New York crowd made him feel. If you've watched him over the past decade plus, his history with that New York crowd hasn't always been the best, oftentimes for no fault of his own. But this year he really got some endearing moments with that crowd, especially in the final. And with the addition of that, it really shouldn't be that stinging a loss. Long story short, if these two play again in a couple months in Australia, I believe that you'll probably get something closer to that blockbuster of a match that the build-up and hype has been all about with these two in their major finals this year. They'll each be favored to do so, of course, the 2 best hardcourt players in the world, and for now, pretty clearly the 2 best players in the world. This match will transition us into the home stretch of 2021 with the fall. We actually have Indian Wells taking place in the fall this year, in addition to all those indoor events. This US Open title run has also revived Medvedev's run at taking away Djokovic's world number 1. A year-end number 1 finish this year would give Djokovic the most year-end number 1 finishes in history, breaking a tie with Pete Sampras. The possibility of Medvedev doing it is still pretty slim. It'd have to probably rely on Djokovic sitting the rest of the year while Medvedev continues his impressive run of form from the North American hardcourt swing. Beyond that, you're going to see a lot of new faces at Turin, a lot of the usual suspects missing, and yeah, we should be in for a nice finish. Congratulations again to Daniil Medvedev for his maiden Grand Slam title. It was about damn time one of these younger guys finally broke through at a slam. After all, they're all now closer to 25 than they are to what you would consider next gen. With Medvedev, we knew it was only a matter of time ever since that 2019 summer and US Open final. He's a fun character and a tremendous tennis player, so I'm glad it came full circle here at the US Open. bringing down the curtain on a really fun 2021 Grand Slam season and marking the end of this video. I know this video is kind of late. I've been under the weather for the last week, if you couldn't tell from my voice, but if you were able to trudge your way through that and make it to the end of this video, it would be much appreciated if you could drop a like if you enjoyed and subscribe to the channel if you're not already. There's still tennis to be played in this 2021 season. We got a couple more months, so I'll be right here pumping out more content. Thank you all for watching, and of course, I will see y'all in the next one.